In the vast savannas of what is now northern Nigeria, long before colonial borders were drawn, a constellation of powerful city-states flourished. These were the Hausa kingdoms, ancient polities such as Kano, Katsina, Zaria, Gober, Dora, and Bairam. For centuries, these states dominated trade routes that linked sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa. Caravans moved across dusty plains, carrying leather, cloth, salt, gold, and enslaved people. Their walled cities rose from the earth in ochre and clay, markets alive with the rhythm of bargaining voices, iron striking anvil, camels groaning under the weight of commerce. The Hausa rulers were kings, Sarakuna, who governed complex bureaucracies. They commanded cavalry armies, collected taxes, and presided over courts rich in poetry and scholarship. Islam had reached Hausaland centuries earlier through trade and scholarship from the Maghreb. But while the rulers publicly professed Islam, they often blended it with older spiritual practices. Traditional religious rites continued alongside mosque prayers. Diviners still advised kings. Sacred trees were not easily abandoned. Living among them, sometimes at the edges of towns, sometimes integrated into society, were the Fulani. The Fulani were pastoralists, moving cattle across the grasslands in seasonal migrations. They were also scholars, clerics, and traders. Not a single political unit, but a scattered people bound by language and lineage, their community stretched from Senegal to Lake Chad. By the 18th century, many Fulani scholars were deeply committed to Islamic reform. They were disturbed by what they saw in Hausa courts: corruption, heavy taxation, enslavement of fellow Muslims, and rulers who invoked Islam but governed with practices they considered un-Islamic. Among these reformers was a man born in 1754 in Gober, Usman dan Fodio. His voice would change the course of West African history. Usman dan Fodio was not born into royalty. He was a scholar, a teacher, a preacher. He traveled across Hausaland, teaching Quranic recitation, jurisprudence, and reformist theology. His sermons were not merely spiritual reflections, they were sharp critiques. He condemned moral decay in Hausa courts. He attacked unjust taxation. He criticized rulers who enslaved Muslims. He warned against syncretism, the mixing of Islam with pre-Islamic beliefs. His message spread like fire through dry grass. Peasants, students, and marginalized Fulani pastoralists gathered around him. Even some Hausa commoners joined. His movement was not initially ethnic, it was ideological. It called for purification and justice. At first, the rulers tolerated him. The king of Gober saw value in having a respected scholar within his domain. But as Dan Fodio's following grew, tolerance turned into fear. A preacher who commands loyalty beyond tribal lines becomes a political threat. By 1804, tensions erupted. The declaration of jihad. When persecution of his followers intensified, Usman dan Fodio made a dramatic decision. He declared a jihad, religiously justified struggle against what he called corrupt Muslim rulers. He and his followers performed a hijra, a migration reminiscent of the Prophet Muhammad's journey from Mecca to Medina. It was both symbolic and strategic. It framed their movement not as rebellion, but as sacred restoration. Armed with religious legitimacy, they began military campaigns. The Fulani forces were not large at first. But they were driven by conviction, organization, and a unifying ideology. They framed their war as one of purification, against tyranny and impiety. Hausa kingdoms, divided among themselves, failed to unite effectively. Rivalries weakened them. Some elites underestimated the movement. Others defected. Between 1804 and 1808, city after city fell. Gober collapsed. Kano fell. Katsina followed. Zaria surrendered. The conquest was not merely battlefield victories, it was administrative replacement. Fulani leaders, often former students of Dan Fodio, were installed as emirs. Hausa dynasties were displaced or subordinated. The revolution spread beyond Hausaland. By 1808, the Fulani jihad had reshaped much of northern Nigeria and parts of modern Niger and Cameroon. Out of the upheaval emerged a vast Islamic state, the Sokoto Caliphate, with its capital in Sokoto. Usman dan Fodio did not crown himself king. Instead, he assumed the title of Caliph, Amir al-Mu'minin, commander of the faithful. Governance was delegated to emirs under a centralized religious authority. This was political genius. The Fulani conquest was not random violence. It was calculated transformation. 1. Religious legitimacy as political weapon. By framing the war as jihad, Dan Fodio elevated political rebellion into divine obligation. Loyalty to rulers was replaced by loyalty to faith. Opposition became heresy. This religious framing fractured Hausa unity. Muslim commoners could morally justify turning against their own rulers. 2. Elite co-option. Not all Hausa elites were destroyed. Some were absorbed. Skilled administrators were retained under Fulani oversight. Governance structures were preserved but reoriented. This reduced resistance and ensured continuity. 3. Decentralized control. The Sokoto Caliphate was not a single centralized monarchy. It was a network of emirates. Emirs pledged allegiance to Sokoto but governed locally. This allowed rapid expansion without administrative collapse. 4. Educational mobilization. Scholars became political agents. Literacy in Arabic and Islamic jurisprudence became a pathway to authority. Knowledge legitimized power. The jihad was fought with swords, but sustained with books. Religion was not merely a justification. It was the foundation. The movement sought to eliminate practices considered un-Islamic. Sacred groves were abandoned. Royal rituals tied to indigenous belief were suppressed. Legal systems were replaced with stricter applications of Sharia. But reality was complex. Islam had long existed in Hausaland. What changed was enforcement and authority. The Fulani reformers insisted on orthodoxy, condemning syncretism and emphasizing moral discipline. Yet, over time, even the new rulers faced contradictions. Power corrupts reformers as it does kings. Wealth accumulated. Political intrigues re-emerged. The ideals of purification met the realities of empire. What became of the Hausa people? They were not annihilated. Culturally, the Hausa language survived, and thrived. In fact, Hausa became the lingua franca of northern Nigeria and beyond. It absorbed Arabic influences and became a powerful medium of literature and trade. Politically, however, the old Hausa aristocracies lost dominance. Many emirates were now ruled by Fulani dynasties. The identity of Hausa Fulani began to emerge, a blending of ruling classes. Religiously, Islam became more deeply entrenched. Islamic courts expanded. Quranic schools multiplied. Islamic scholarship flourished under the caliphate. But there were darker dimensions. The jihad and its aftermath intensified slavery. War captives were enslaved. Expansion campaigns reached into non-Muslim territories, especially toward what is now central Nigeria. Entire communities were displaced. Some critics argue that while the jihad sought moral reform, it also consolidated Fulani dominance over agrarian populations. The line between reform and conquest blurred. By the late 19th century, the Sokoto Caliphate was one of the largest states in Africa. Then came European imperialism. In 1903, British forces defeated Sokoto's armies. The Caliphate fell. But instead of dismantling the emirate system, the British preserved it under indirect rule. Fulani emirs retained authority, now subordinate to colonial power. This decision reshaped Nigeria's future. When Nigeria became independent in 1960, the legacy of the Caliphate still influenced political structures in the north. The Hausa and Fulani identities had become deeply intertwined. The Fulani conquest of the Hausa kingdoms was not a simple ethnic war. It was a revolution framed in religious reform, executed with political intelligence, and sustained by institutional restructuring. It shows how religion can mobilize the marginalized. Ideology can fracture established power. Reform movements can become ruling elites. Cultural identities evolve through conquest rather than disappear. The story is not one of total destruction. It is one of transformation, painful, forceful, and enduring. Power shifted hands. Faith reshaped governance. Identities merged. And yet, beneath political change, the markets of Kano still hummed. The Hausa language still carried poetry. Life continued. History rarely erases completely. It absorbs. In the windswept plains of northern Nigeria, the echoes of hoofbeats from the early 19th century still resonate. The jihad of Usman dan Fodio did not simply topple kings, it reordered society. It forged a caliphate, intensified Islam's presence, displaced dynasties, and reshaped identity. Today, when we speak of northern Nigeria's political and religious landscape, we are witnessing the long shadow of that revolution. Empires fall. Faith endures. Power transforms. And in the silence between history's battles, cultural change. Tell us your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you.